Hi everyone, I'm Gili. I'm the Chief Legal Advisor of the Israeli Privacy Protection Authority. First of all, I'd like to thank the Israel Tech Policy Institute, the Future of Privacy Forum, Jules and Omer, of course, for inviting us to participate in this important panel. Most of you probably remember us as Elita. Last September, we initiated a government decision to rename the authority, and we are now called the Israeli Privacy Protection Authority. Changing our name was not just a matter of branding. It is something much deeper than that. It's about focusing on the authority's goals and challenges. It's about protecting every person's privacy in today's disruptive and ever-changing reality. The reality keeps changing, and usually legislation lags behind. But last month, there was a major change in legislation. We've all heard about the GDPR, but 2 weeks before it, the new Israeli data protection regulations had come into effect. These new regulations determine the minimal data protection standards to all types of database. Small ones, sensitive ones, those in the private sector, and governmental ones. Some of us might see the regulation as a burden to businesses. Others will see them as great opportunities. I'm pretty sure that our speakers today will represent those who see the enormous potential in these regulations. We have representatives from a wide range of companies, from international giants to young and promising startups. They all share the same passion to privacy. So let's please start with a quick round of intros. Could you kindly introduce yourselves, tell us where you work and what you do? Maybe we'll start from you, Nimrod.
Okay, hi.
Thanks.
My name is Nimrod Vax. I'm the co-founder of BigID. BigID is an Israeli and US-based startup focused on data and privacy protection. We take a unique approach to data protection that enables all of the new use cases that are required for privacy, knowing who the user, whose data is found where, and being able to correlate it back to an identity, and then by that being able to address data subject rights, breach response requirements, record of processing activities, and these type of requirements.
Hi, I'm Orly Friedman Marton. I'm the head of legal and corporate affairs in Microsoft Israel.
Hi, my name is Yossi Koren. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Privacy Rating. Privacy Rating is a company that developed technologies to manage and control traffic of private information over open networks. We know how to recognize private information while it flows via open networks, and we allow actually either users or businesses, publishers, to apply a whitelist which represent their policy or consent policy over the network.
Hi, I'm Gil Perry, CEO of DID. We developed algorithms that protects identities. We protect photos and videos from face recognition technologies. So we process photos and videos in such a way so they're still useful for the organization. Basically, most of the time it means that they look the same to the human eyes, but face recognition algorithms cannot recognize the subjects in the photos anymore.
Hi, I'm Clara Vishik. I'm honored and delighted to be here, and I am interested in topics at the intersection of technology and policy. There are many of them, and they are all interesting.
Thanks. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting discussion, so let's begin. And we'll start with you. We will start with you, Orly. Is it possible to promote innovation without sacrificing privacy, or are we just a bunch of naives?
No, I'm a big believer that we can advance innovation while preserving privacy. I will state more than that. I believe that around this table there are numerous startups and there are numerous examples within Microsoft that I will not share. I'll let my counterparts share examples of how innovation is moving forward while putting at its upfront privacy as a timeless value and as a human right. As far as Microsoft is concerned, I'll say that we are completely committed to privacy, for long-term commitment to privacy. We believe that privacy is the basis, it's a human right, and it's the basis of trust for technology. We don't believe that people would use technology if they can't trust it. And I don't believe people will trust it if it harms their human rights and if it harms their privacy. I'd say our development process, our development and research and our processes are built on the concept of privacy by design, as it has been introduced now in GDPR, but has been long due within Microsoft. And I think Microsoft as a corporation, a long-lasting corporation, is an example actually for how innovation goes hand in hand with privacy, because I would look at Microsoft as a company that has long been a software company. And today, after many years, it's, I'd say, one of the 3 hyperscale cloud service providers in the world. It's a company that deals with AI, and it does so while preserving privacy and putting it as a human right at the basis of its development and research.
Thanks. Thanks. The next question is for Yossi. Do the new regulations, the GDPR and the Israeli ones, encourage innovation and the development of new tools, or are they actually blocking new players?
So generally or typically, actually, regulation should discourage innovation. I think the domain of privacy is a unique one because it's a very concentrated or vendor-concentrated domain, and as such, it represents great opportunities to companies with technology, like ourselves. If you're looking specific at the EdTech segment, due to this phenomena, actually a lot of people were afraid that on the 25th of May, actually there will be a growing share of the big players. And by the way, some of the people think it is the situation right now, but we believe that it won't last long. What we are actually suggesting, actually, and I reiterate what Paul said before, actually we are suggesting a disruptive for disruption, meaning by the end of the day we would like to neutralize this segment of EdTech, and we would like to somehow settle the relation between controller and processor. The ability to for controller, data become widespread. Big data will become widespread. It will be wiser to choose a different battlefield, and the battlefield that we are in is actually the communication battlefield. We are allowing users, and I mentioned before, allow users and the publishers and advertisers to actually control the communication even before it reaches the database. I'm not sure that most of you know that according to analysts in the US at least, 30 to 40% of the estimated private information traffic is what they call over-harvesting or over-collection. It comes from different reasons, but by the end of the day, first of all, of course, we block this or we allow to block this over collection. On top of that, we give some leverage or power to users and to publishers to deal with those third parties tracking technologies. By the end of the day, we believe that there will be a new equilibrium that actually allow publishers to demonstrate what we call the privacy responsibility. Based on that, this will be one of the major factors that the customer will decide about one publisher or another.
So further to the thing Yossi mentioned, Nimrod, do you think that applying better privacy practices contributes to the business beyond compliance? Or maybe strict regulation is the only incentive for applying privacy solutions?
Well, so if you look at some of the biggest brands out there, beyond Microsoft, they are all putting a lot of effort and investment in privacy. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Nike, for example, has a recruiting event every IPP summit. And they spend a lot of money in recruiting people for their privacy engineering team. And we're seeing that from being an early startup in this area, we've seen all of the large brands looking for technology to help them protect their brand from a privacy perspective. So it's a very important aspect. And speaking also to people in this industry that are selling this internally, they sell privacy and spending on privacy around the importance that it has to the brand. Also, if you look at what happened to Facebook after the recent scandal with Cambridge Analytica, I think they realized that even without a very strict regulation, because it's not clear whether they, what was the legal aspect of what they did, even without looking at the legal aspect. Yeah, but even without looking at the legal aspect, the damage has already been done, and the stock dropped, and the impact in terms of trust of their consumers has been dramatic. So one of the insights, I think, for them is that you don't need regulation for that. It's the trust of your consumers that is very important.
Thanks. I'll move on to Claire, if we'll see her. Claire?
Yes?
Israel has a vibrant data security technology ecosystem. Does it play a role in privacy tech?
Absolutely. I don't know what the definition of ecosystem we should adopt. It certainly has a lot of components, a lot of access. One of them is the legal and regulatory, and other people on this panel can address it better. But there are several other components where Israel is very, very strong. One of them is the system of education. When you are talking about the use of technology, there is a continuum from awareness that privacy is important to expertise. That's how I protect my privacy. And even this is how I design new privacy technologies. And that's where Israel is very strong. If you start introducing technical topics earlier, then when people reach the university education or the workforce, they can protect themselves much better based on the model of use that they have adopted. They could be those people who like some level of exposure and want to inform everyone on Facebook about what they are doing. They could be people who resent any slightest level of exposure and use Tor for all their communications. And they will know better how to support their model. But even more importantly, there are two areas of privacy if you take a technologist's view. One of them is how to break things, how to discover privacy attacks. The other one is how to build technology that are resistant to privacy attacks, how to build privacy-enhancing technologies. And Israel is very strong in this area because there is this flourishing innovative technology environment in Israel. It's only through new technologies that we discover where the attacks actually are located. Well, think about the 1980s, where we discovered that if you combine non-identifying databases together through aggregation, you actually are able to identify the subject, the data subject. And from that, many regulatory activities such as the data protection and the privacy regulation in Europe and their successors were born. We didn't think before that hardware and device identifiers are important in the privacy big picture, but then came Intel serial processor number, and we understood how important identifiers in general are. We also understood how to create technologies based on hardware, and Intel is making some of them, including the most popular ones, such as anonymous signature, used in most protocols to obfuscate the data subjects. So now there are new frontiers that we need to cross for the technology. One of them is the understanding of how to treat cyber-physical systems, such as connected cars, the systems where privacy, security, and safety have to be considered together. You don't want to create privacy protections that are going to then enable someone to attack the actuator that actuates your brake when you don't want to brake. And it is in Israel that many of these technologies are going to be born and have been born already. So I think the vibrant infrastructure, technology infrastructure in Israel is extremely important to privacy. It's important because it gives us understanding of both technology and legal problems, but most of all because it gives us solutions to those problems.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you, Gil, your business helps manage the privacy risks associated with facial recognition, mostly biometric information contained in photos. Why is it so important to protect photos?
Okay, so I'll give a short background. I remind we protect photos and videos from face recognition. So in today's reality, we're being photographed everywhere we go. We have CCTV cameras, smart cities, smart homes, smartphones. We're being photographed everywhere. And on the same time, we just upload our photos everywhere to social networks, to the web. And third, face recognition. So face recognition market is kind of exploding because of deep learning. It's really accurate, and it's everywhere. So when you combine the three, face recognition, photos everywhere. Also, companies store our photos of the employees and customers, and the photos are not protected. So when you combine face recognition, photos everywhere, and cameras everywhere, the reality that you get is that anyone with access to these photos, to this data, can basically track you, steal your identity, hack your devices. And I'll explain. So face recognition has basically made our faces, our photos, become our identifiers. For example, in China now, it is everywhere, face recognition. They rank the citizens' behavior. They give fines to jaywalkers. In Russia, the government arrests opponents in protests using face recognition. There's even an app in Russia that basically anyone can, using his phone, can identify a random stranger in the street using his photos from social networks. Now our phones, our devices, iPhone X, Samsung Galaxy 8, 9, Huawei, we access them using face recognition. Banks are moving into face recognition. In Alipay, you can pay with face recognition. Retail, so Walmart, for example, they check the satisfaction of the shoppers using face recognition. So it's everywhere. That's just a few examples. Face recognition have made our faces become our identifiers, our keys, our passwords to everything. But the difference from passwords is that it's a body part. You cannot change it if it's stolen, so there's a contradiction. The market is growing exponentially, and we just throw our photos everywhere, the biometric information, and we are kind of filling this gap. We're not the only one who realized that, so regulators have noticed this as well. GDPR has addressed face images as not only just personal information, but a special category, sensitive personal information. And that's what we do. We process these biometric databases, the photos and videos, in such a way so they look the same to the human eye. You can still use them on Facebook, on biometric database, etc. But deep learning face recognition algorithms cannot identify the subject in the photo. So just to summarize for your question, people need to understand before doing a biometric passport, before putting the photos on Facebook, these photos are now being used to identify us as keys, and regulation is not enough. You know, regulation is legal, but it's not really protecting us, so just think twice before you're uploading photos, and that's the importance of protecting photos.
Thank you, Gil. We are diving into the technology part. Nimrod, could you please tell us about the BigID product and how it's different from other data security solutions?
Sure. Thanks. So to understand that, you have to understand the difference or the new aspects that privacy brings to data protection, because it's not, if you look also on the GDPR, it's primarily a data protection regulation, but it also has new privacy requirements. And those new privacy requirements require you to address requirements like data subject rights, right? The right to be forgotten. You have to know where someone's data is found in order to delete it. Or breach response. You have to notify people that were impacted by a breach. In order to do that, you need to know where everyone's data is found. So it's not enough to know where you have personal information. You need to correlate it back to the identity so that you can answer those requirements. If you look at solutions today, solutions for data protection, they can tell you where you have personal information. They can tell you where you have social security numbers or phone numbers or emails, but they don't know whose data it is. And you have to know that in order to satisfy those privacy kind of requirements. The other aspect is that if you look at the marketplace today for a privacy regulation and regulation in general, the solutions are typically GRC-based solutions. There are solutions that manage the process of compliance. So they help you drive the policy, they help you drive surveys and interviews across your business. It's primarily managing the process. And those solutions are rarely really connected to the data itself. We've identified that at BigID, and we've built a solution that helps you combine the two together. So you can have a business process documentation, which is needed for a record of processing activities, that is actually connected to the data. And as new data is discovered, it would automatically drive responses or additional information from the business users to attest and to provide more context, business context to that data. For example, if you have certain, if you're maintaining certain information about your customers in a marketing application, and suddenly you add, the system discovers that you're collecting also the date of birth, it would automatically trigger a workflow for the application owner to provide the purpose of processing. Why are you collecting this information? In the past, this would be only discovered in the next cycle of privacy impact assessment or regulation, and not something that would be kept continuously up to date. So those are kind of the main factors: the identity awareness, which is unique, tying the business back to the data, and also dealing with the diversity and scale of the data today. So both structured and unstructured data, big data, and cloud storage, and bringing all of that together to one place.
I see that your solutions are designed to protect data subjects, help them optimizing their control over their personal data. But your clients are organizations and companies. Maybe, Yossi, you could explain why this is so?
Yes, sure. So the main issue that we are trying to solve is about the relation between controller and processors. As I mentioned before, there is imbalance between those two, mainly in the tech market. And what we're trying to do actually is to allow a full control of the publisher, or it can be an advertiser, or even the user itself. We allow them to have a real-time, full control over the full data, the private data information that's actually going out from the user device. Meaning, for example, if we are, let's say, a financial service organization, and we would like or we have an agreement with a certain third-party processor, sorry, we exactly determine what will be the level of collection that we are permitting this third-party processor, and we allow, with our tools, actually to have a real-time control over this flow of information. We also bring out alerts in case of violation of this policy, and we also logging or archiving all the transaction in order to present or to show evidence to regulators. So at the beginning, we try to go to the end users. We realize that end users are, at least as of today, because of awareness on some other reasons, they are not in the position that they can actually understand the full complexity or the full ability of the third parties of collection. That's why we decided to start with publishers, although by the end of the day, the greater goods go to the customer.
I'll move on now to Gil and Nimrod. Your products are also directed to the database owners and the processors. Do you believe that in the future there will be a thriving market for data subjects? You want to start?
Yeah. Yeah, so there are already some solutions that address the data subjects. There are companies on the West Coast that do that, actually combine blockchain and kind of a personal data wallet. There's an Israeli company that started in that area as well. I think the demand is really not quite there in terms of the awareness of the end users. So it kind of a little bit contradicting what I said about Facebook. What reacted was the market predominantly. And you know, just like with gambling and other kind of things that the end users typically tend to do, they have a very tendency for a very short-term kind of memory or delaying satisfaction as it relates to their privacy. But this is we are seeing that changing, but it would take probably longer for that awareness to come. Hopefully, with the legislation, with the GDPR. I know that the Commission is planning to raise this awareness. We are seeing advertisement also here in Israel around it, so that people will become more aware of it, and that can drive more business.
Gil, would you like to elaborate?
Yes. So first, I think there's a lot of place for consumers, privacy-enhancing applications. We have an interesting story about the idea for that, but before that, I think like concepts such as the right to be forgotten, like Nimrod said, and consent, in general, data portability, it brings a lot of place for consumer applications. And I think there is, awareness is starting to be, people are starting to be more aware. When we started BigID, the idea, we thought there is a huge market for consumers. We thought to build an app for consumers that they will be able to take pictures, protect their pictures in social networks. It was just 2 years ago, before the iPhone, before the Cambridge Analytica and everything. And then people thought we were paranoid and a bit crazy. We heard about the GDPR and we pivoted to B2B, B2G. But now there is the awareness is getting there. We have been approached hundreds of times, maybe even thousands, to build this app. People care about their privacy, and I think we will start with first, in order to make the most impact, to protect biometric databases of governments, of social networks such as Facebook, etc. And then if we'll keep on getting these responses, at least at BigID, we think there is a huge market and potential for other entrepreneurs to enter this market. People are getting aware about that.
Can I have one sentence?
Sure.
You know, as a startup, it's not a secret that actually B2C approach, or to start with B2C approach, is very difficult. And I think that maybe Nimrod and Gil will agree with it.
We started with the B2C approach.
Yeah, but very, very fast we realized that B2B is better.
You understood it hard way. Gil mentioned awareness, and I would like to ask you, Orly, what impact do you think that the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook scandals will have in the long term?
Okay, I will not go into details of those scandals, but I will say that these cases exemplify that in this era where previous speakers addressed it as data is king and data is currency, and we live in a fourth industrial revolution, that it's clear for us as a company, but I think it's important for the entire tech industry, that we have a responsibility and accountability on what do we do with this technology. I think the advantages of the technology today that we all understand, it's almost endless, I'd say, if we consider health, if we consider education, if we consider people with disabilities, if we consider environmental challenges. Everywhere we look, the advantages are almost endless, I would say. But then the responsibility is that we have to weigh in seriously. What are the dangers? What are the challenges that we have to take into consideration? And I'd add to that I think it also requires, and people talked about the grown-up or something, I think it requires a certain level of maturity that says, or that considers not only what technology can do, but what technology should do, and what it shouldn't at the same level. And I'll give an example of what we do internally. For example, we've established a board, an ethical group that is built from people that come from it's a very diversified group that is considering AI ethics, okay? So it would consider maybe projects that we would step away from, or that we would not, or developments that we would not take part in, and we would not support in any way. So this is kind of the way of thinking that I think would come forward.
Yeah, maybe I have to add, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that Facebook realizes is that relying on policies and contracts for privacy enforcement is probably not enough. And there needs to be more reliance on technology. We're seeing, when we entered this market of privacy, we've seen that most of the privacy enforcement was done through manual processes. And relying on that is just not good enough. It's going to have a very hefty price for those companies.
Claire, what do you think about this subject? Do you believe that such scandals will have an impact on the IT industry?
Yes, I think so. I think it was an important learning experience, just like previous learning experiences about data aggregation or identifiers influenced both the regulations and the IT industry. So in 2013, with academic collaborators, I wrote a paper based on Facebook data. It was an academic paper. Like mostly everyone in the community, we looked at the space as the person and their network. Not everyone, of course, stopped there, but mostly that's how Facebook and other social networks were viewed. But Cambridge Analytica in Facebook case, speaking as a technologist, changed the picture. We understood how much wider it goes. It's a person, their network, each of their networked person's network and many networks beyond that. That's how Cambridge Analytica got a lot of data. And that, of course, changed the picture for the technologists, for data managers, for regulators. This also brought into the picture adjacent technologies, and I will name some of them, not all of them. For instance, think about machine-to-machine data. Some of the data that is being processed is really personal data that needs to be obfuscated, but there is a lot of machine-to-machine protocol data that can be re-identified based on patterns, devices, locations, and other things. So we began to understand how important this aspect is, because it makes the activities of data subjects highly identifiable. Another example, think about artificial intelligence, well, both reasoning-based and algorithm-based. It also allows allows you to bring forward data about the subjects that are not really primarily included or about their activities. And think about other technologies that are based on multiple nodes that are connected to other nodes. The thing that comes to mind first is blockchain. Well, think about permissionless, public, highly distributed blockchain like Bitcoin. There are a lot of things to decide there. For instance, if you contribute to the blockchain, but also control some of the data in the blockchain, you are at the same time a data subject and a data controller. How can we treat this from the regulatory point of view? Think also about the location. Well, the ledger can be replicated at multiple locations. Who is responsible for those copies? So I think from the point of view of not stating only the issue, like most papers have done, but trying to resolve it and connect it to other adjacent issues, I think what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica is very important, and I think it will change many things around how we design technologies, how we deploy technologies, and how we regulate them.
Thank you. Let's try to sum up with one question. Same question I'd like to ask you, to ask all of you. 2 minutes each. Post-May 2018, what's next? Who wants to begin?
What was the question? Again?
Post-May 2018, what's next?
Oh, what's next? Okay.
So I think, various things, right? But what we feel we're seeing in the market is that a lot of organizations that were not early adopters of technology raced to the deadline of May 25th and did whatever was possible to be certified and be compliant. And we've seen some of the largest banks in the world using Excel spreadsheets to manage privacy across 180 countries. Just to be able to show that they've done something and that they are compliant and they have done the privacy impact assessment and they have some policies in place. I think what will happen now and what is happening and we're seeing it is that those organizations are now coming back and saying, okay, how can I make this sustainable? How can I continue and maintain this, these mountains of spreadsheets? And not that there's anything bad about Excel. It's a very good tool, but it's not something that is supposed to scale and manage privacy. And we are seeing now those companies coming back and say, okay, what is the automation I can put in place to continue and maintain and continuously maintain my compliance state?
Okay, so I'll also say a few things. First of all, I'll pick up on what you said. I'll agree that it's an ongoing process. There's no arrival point. I don't think there's an arrival point, neither on privacy nor on security. I think it's a constant process that needs to continue and be done as technology evolves and as companies continue to grow and evolve. So it's just an ongoing, and I do think that privacy by design and especially the understanding that you need to do it right from the start instead of fixing it retroactively is one of the things that we're gonna, or I believe is gonna be bigger. There are main pillars that will have to be part of the ongoing innovation that comes along. I'd say the 3 pillars are privacy, security, and ethical AI. I think we need to consider that we're just gonna see much more data used, more sophisticated technology, and I'd say a wider spread of companies that are dealing with data. So it's not technology companies, it's kind of every company is a data company, and that has its own implications. I'd pick up on a lot of things that were said today that I do think that this would require multi-stakeholders, discussions, continuance, and building principles that do set the standard of what we do and don't do with technology. And I do think that this would need to apply across the boards on companies and governments altogether. So vis-a-vis citizens, vis-a-vis customers, and vis-a-vis consumers.
What I envision actually is increasing importance for the communication versus, let's say, database management or database importance. And I will give a few examples. First of all, I think it was mentioned today that data ethics of a publisher is going to be a major factor in choosing a certain service compared to other service. And this can be done only by actually protecting the user from unwanted collection. The other area is, of course, AI. Today, AI's tools actually cannot be enabled or disabled without being able to control the communication. And in order to do that, you need to be there and control communication. The last example that I want to make is about the autonomous, let's say, transportation means and the autonomous or smart spaces. This is areas where actually you are dealing with a multi-database interface or multi-database interaction. And in order to be able to control what you want to control or to apply a certain policy, you must own the communication.
So probably we're going to see the big companies, gatekeepers of the internet, facing some big lawsuits. And then from an entrepreneur's point of view, what I hope will happen is that people will also, entrepreneurs will learn the regulations and will see these big lawsuits and especially the gap between regulation and technology and reality, and will use this, because regulation by itself is not really protecting our privacy. So if technology entrepreneurs will learn and see these gaps, see these opportunities to protect privacy and also to do business and fill this gap, then I think we'll see a lot of new privacy enhancing technologies and tools and new entrepreneurs also using it.
Excellent points expressed so far. Unfortunately, I don't know what is going to happen, but I can say what I hope will happen. On the regulatory front, we now have GDPR that certainly has taken leadership in the regulatory thought worldwide, but we also have many different regulations. There is something different in China and in Russia. There's a different view in the US and a different one in the Philippines. So I hope in the future there will be more ways found to achieve greater harmonization of this diverse regulatory space. It's of course important to have technology and process that protect the users, but also the users must know how to protect themselves. And I hope that there will be more and more countries that introduce technology studies that also teach about privacy and events of this nature earlier in the education process, so that the adults have a fairly good idea about what they can do and what they need to do. On the technology front, I hope that one of my favorite issues will be resolved, one of composition. So now we treat privacy and data protection by separate technology domains based on one database or one data transmission. But a typical process today is multi-domain. We have parts of the process where data could be very private, and other parts where there is a data controller that needs to know the identity, like in finance, and other components of the electronic process where data are not completely protected. I hope we will find technologies that will allow to resolve the issue of composition. On the product side, I hope that there will be products where privacy is introduced by default without impeding usability as well. And finally, I hope that for every one of those points, we will focus not on the problems, but on the solutions.
Thanks, Claire. I also believe that there is no arrival point, but we arrived to the end of the panel. Thank you very much all for this very interesting and fruitful discussion. Of course, that as the privacy regulator, I was very happy to learn that privacy protection and innovation can go and should go hand in hand. And thank you for your attention.